A political threat looms over much of the world. Developed countries, as well as many emerging countries, such as in China's case, are beginning to see the effects that demographic aging and many public services unsustainability can cause with increasing concern. Along with pensions, health is another of the fields that generate the most uncertainties and fears. An increasingly aging population and the emergence of new and expensive medical technologies have raised some very important questions. Will we be able to pay for a quality healthcare system, or will we be condemned to a precarious health situation that affects our life prospects? Is there a successful model that can lead the way? Are there alternatives? Well, in this video, we're going to look at a system that we may more or less like, but which we should definitely know about and take into account throughout this debate. So let's have a look at it. Check out the following graph. It shows a country leaving the third world behind and becoming one of the richest areas on the planet. "35 years ago, Singapore and Spain had the same per capita income. Today, however, the former more than doubles the Spanish per capita income. In 2015, Singapore's per capita income was $86,100 per year, and Spain's was just $34,750. But even if we look at countries like Finland, Denmark, Sweden, Germany, or the United States as examples, we'd be able to see that Singapore is much richer than any of them. However, it's often said that Singapore's example isn't good enough because their wealth essentially comes from a financial sector that is much larger than any of the aforementioned countries. And that's true, but it's not the only key to this small state's success. The weight of Singapore's financial sector isn't big enough to explain these differences in per capita income. In fact, if we were to eliminate the effects of these countries' different financial sector sizes, Singapore would still be much richer than the others. Because actually, both trade and manufacturing are more important in Singapore than the financial sector. We're talking about one of the largest merchandise exporting countries in the entire world. For example, the proportion of electronic material that this country exports in relation to its GDP is larger than the proportion of anything exported by countries like Spain, Sweden, Denmark, or even Germany. So the question now becomes, how did Singapore achieve such a high level of prosperity? Well, if we wanted to simplify it, we could say that Singapore is the second freest economy in the world, according to the Index of Economic Freedom published annually by the Heritage Foundation and the Wall Street Journal. Its public spending, for example, is half of the US's and a third of Sweden's. Listen to the words of the historic president of Singapore, Lee Kuan Yew, which successfully reflect the real foundations of this country's economic success.
When most of the Third World was deeply suspicious of exploitation by Western multinational corporations, Singapore invited them in. They helped us grow, brought in technology and know-how, and raised productivity levels faster than any alternative strategy could have. Lee Kuan Yew.
Singapore's success is therefore not due to the financial industry, but due to the same reasons that have led to the growth of other economies: legal security, low taxes, monetary stability, and moderate regulations. A commitment to the free market has made this country become, in many areas, an example to follow. And we're not only talking strictly about economics here, but also certain social issues such as health. Yeah, you heard that right. Singapore is also a role model in terms of health policy.
An impossible challenge?
Let's take a look, for example, at Spain's case, a country whose health system is considered one of the most efficient on the planet. Well, the problem is that beyond being corrigible, it isn't sustainable. See, in just a decade, the total cost of the Spanish health system has almost doubled, and everything indicates that as a result of the aging population and the demand for new and expensive health technologies, this trend will be unstoppable and will continue to worsen year after year. And don't think that this only happens in Spain. Not at all, in fact. Medical bills, that is, the sustainability of health systems, is a widespread problem in other developed countries. So the question that arises is, how can we overcome these challenges and ensure the sustainability of healthcare systems? A good model, which is never taken into account, could perhaps be that of a completely free health system, a system in which demand and supply are determined by the market and not in political offices. This could lead to some benefits. For one, more money for families thanks to lower taxes and a precautionary saving level against any ailments that may arise that's higher than the present one. This would allow for direct primary care payments and insurance against minor ailments, common issues, and more expensive treatments. Another benefit would be a greater diversity of and competition among different health centers. This would mean that given the threat of being displaced in the market, productivity, differentiation, and innovation would be promoted. In other words, we'd achieve a wide range of services that would positively impact both the quality of the service and lead to lower prices. Competition is usually the best formula to guarantee better goods and services for consumers, and healthcare is not any different. However, nowadays, no country uses all of these principles, and no, the US healthcare system, as we'll see, isn't precisely a free market model. Now, there is a country that has used some of these characteristics, and it has done so with extraordinary results. So let's consider Singapore's case.
A model for health reform.
Right now, Singapore has the best healthcare system in the world. It's top quality and costs practically half of that of Spain's healthcare system and less than a third of that of the United States. But this isn't just a matter of lower cost, it's also, and above all, about quality and results. See, life expectancy at birth in Singapore is 2 to 3 years longer than in Britain or the United States. Its infant mortality rate is among the lowest in the world and is almost half that of the United States, Great Britain, Australia, Canada, or France. And in general, its mortality rates are impressive compared to most Western countries. Now, the question we can ask ourselves here is, how did they achieve such success? Well, in this case, they have achieved it fundamentally by using market criteria. First of all, the main feature of the Singapore model doesn't just lie in the fact that more than 60% of all health spending is private, but that to a large extent, it is paid directly by users. That is, co-payment is the norm here. But not everyone pays the same when they go to a hospital. There are public and private centers, as well as 5 levels, 5 classes: A, B1, B2+, B2, and C. Each of these letters gives users a different service. For example, Class A gets you a private room and a choice of doctor, while in Class C the room is shared and the doctor is assigned by the hospital. Of course, each class has a different cost. If a user chooses Class A, they pay for everything. Instead, if they choose Class C, the government subsidizes 80% of the cost. But where do people get the money to pay for healthcare? Well, from the same place as in other countries, from the wealth that they generate from their work. The difference is that the huge contributions that governments usually collect, they're saved in Singapore in a mandatory way. Yes, citizens have special accounts where they keep this money. They can only use these accounts for certain purposes, such as paying their pensions, their children's education, their home, or their health. In the case of healthcare, the account is known as Medisave and is used to pay for doctor's visits, hospitalizations, medications, etc. This is the second key point of Singapore's medical system. Thanks to this formula, demand is self-regulated and people can manage how to spend the money they accumulate in these accounts. For example, by accessing different kinds of care, whether they want to receive or be hospitalized in hospitals with fewer comforts but which are cheaper, or with more services and higher costs, decreasing redundant and superfluous consumption. Another very important point is that for most serious cases, there's universal public insurance which is known as MediShield that costs only $16 a month for a 30-year-old person. And with it, of course, comes the possibility of hiring other private insurers that improve the services offered. Finally, the third leg of Singapore's health system is public expenditure itself. What happens if someone cannot cover their medical bills? Well, to guarantee access to healthcare, the government subsidizes hospitals and has a public fund, the Medifund, which is designed to pay health bills for lower-income families. So, folks, this is how Singapore has managed to create a relatively economical medical system while achieving results and quality levels that place it among the best health systems in the world according to the World Health Organization and different rankings such as Bloomberg's most efficient healthcare systems. However, despite all of this, when we usually talk about healthcare in the free market, we automatically think of the United States and not Singapore, which is a serious mistake.
Are you listening? Damn. Yeah.
USA versus Singapore.
Yes, indeed, the US does not have a European-style public health system, and since the country's results are quite deplorable considering that it spends more than 17% of its GDP on its healthcare system, which is twice that of most European countries, the debate on health, it seems, settled. Private healthcare is worse than public healthcare because it costs twice as much and has similar or even lower service levels. But this, as we saw with Singapore, where 60% of health spending is private, simply isn't true. In Singapore, the healthcare system isn't only better, it's one of the best in the world, and it involves much lower costs than in other developed countries. The issue is that the US healthcare system isn't only heavily intervened upon and regulated by the government, its cost is tremendously socialized. See, 90% of all health spending is channeled through two different agents other than the patient. Out of every $100 spent in the US health system, 45 comes from insurance companies, 45 from state programs such as Medicaid, and only 10% from patients' pockets. Yep, public health spending in the United States is, in relative terms, higher, for example, than in Spain. But we're going to talk about that in another video. The fact is that, as we've seen, Singapore sets a healthcare system model on the table that has a great combination of cost, innovation, and medical results. We may like some aspects of the system and not others, but I think it wouldn't be unreasonable to take it into account when talking about health, the future, and sustainability. So I really hope you enjoyed that video. Please do hit that like button if you did, and don't forget to subscribe for brand new videos. Also, don't forget to check out our friends at the Reconsider Media podcast who provided the vocals in this episode that were not mine. Also, this channel is possible all because of Patreon and our patrons on the platform of Patreon. Please do consider joining them and supporting us in our mission of providing independent political coverage. And as always, see you in the next video.